From Hong Kong, Chicago, and the city of Stoke-on-Trent, this is the Classic Lenses Podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 76. My name is Simon Forster and I'm joined by Johnny Sisson and Perry G. Hello, Johnny.
Good morning, all.
And hello, Perry.
Good evening.
And it's afternoon here in Stoke-on-Trent at the moment, so spanning the globe again. Let's go straight to Perry. Perhaps you might want to give us a bit of an update on what you've been up to this week.
Yeah, not a ton. After being shamed for not using cheap lenses, I caved into the pressure and took out that Pentacon that's been sitting in my closet for like 12 years. The Pentacon 51.8 M42 mount. And I put it on my Sony, and I went outside to shoot. And as soon as I opened the door, the skies opened up, and a giant thunderstorm started. So, if ever there were a sign from the heavens that you should not be shooting this lens, that was it.
So was there some kind of protest, and then it rained, and therefore you didn't go enjoying it again?
No, the protest was the universe protesting against my sticking this Pentacon on my Sony. But I did use it. I went over and shot some indoor bokeh shots of random crap around the house.
Are you sure you were open all the way, Perry? I mean, because it's got to be open all the way or it doesn't count.
No. The bokeh is hexagonal. Okay. It's not called the hexacon. But and then Ricardo Bayon gave me a hard time for not shooting bokeh shots wide open. He was like, "Hey, who shoots bokeh top down?" I'm like, who shoots everything wide open? No, I'm joking. But I mean, honestly, like, I'm not gonna rant about shooting wide open, but not necessary. But hey, I posted 3 pictures. I shot with a Pentacon. I took it off right afterwards, put a better lens on, and life is better now. So after that, I felt the need to kind of, I don't know, like cleanse myself. No, I shouldn't say that. It's a cute little lens. But I went out shooting with the X-Pan today, and so I'm in a good mood.
Outstanding.
So have you got yourself an X-Pan yet, Johnny? Because we were talking about this earlier. We think that you'd really like one,
I have 3 Minolta X-Pans myself, so 3 is better than 1.
Sorry, I need to ask this question, not about the X-Pan. Why is it that when it comes to shooting pictures with bokeh, it's like you got to shoot it wide open? Why? Why is that? Why? Is
and
that
another thing.
So is this the rant you weren't going to do?
I was just going to say.
Because, yeah, okay. It's okay on a Sony, right? Because, like, when you're shooting on, like, a film SLR, you can't even see the proper bokeh because your focus screen doesn't look right. Oh, my God. I'm not going to... Don't let me do this rant.
No, go for it. Come on.
Do it, Perry.
Let it out.
Okay.
Just let it fly. Let it rip.
I'm taking a picture of, like, a random stuffed animal, right? With some, I don't know,
There's a phrase that I say to myself every day. Taking this picture.
Yeah. And there's lights in the background, so it's like, hey, here's some bokeh. It looks kind of cool. But I'm like, you know what? I kind of want this stuffed animal's eyes to be sharp, right? I want my subject to be in focus and of slightly higher quality than the worst possible quality with my lens. So I stopped the aperture down to f2. Right? Or f2.8. That seems like the right thing to do because, as Hamish Gill always likes to say, the bokeh is the part you're not supposed to look at, right?
Yeah, it's the accompaniment to the shot rather than the reason for the shot in the first place.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's actually one of the reasons why people value preset lenses so much. When people go nuts, it's got 14, 15, 16, 21 blades, because that would allow you to actually stop it down enough, and you would still get those nice round bokeh balls.
That is very true, and there
I thought that was because people thought that lenses shot wide open with more blades were better.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is the nonsense, isn't it? Yeah, because many bokeh fans will value something like the Pentacon 135mm 2.8, the Meyer optic version with 15 blades, and then never close it down. and that always goes for twice or three times the price of the one that the automatic version with six blades, which you can just shoot in exactly the same way. I'm not sure if it's actually the same lens. It might be exactly the same optics, quite possibly. So the same goes, doesn't it, with the Trioplan?
Oh yeah,
the Trioplan
it's
N.
one that shit.
Yeah. Nobody wants a Trioplan N. It goes for hundreds of dollars less than the one with multiple blades. Yeah, you only ever shoot the thing wide open, or it seems that most people only ever shoot it wide open, and you cannot tell the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very good point. Yeah, it's also a good advert for those Cyclop lenses as well. Where they say the 85 1.5 again. I mean, I've got a Helios 40, which is ultimately the same lens, but with an iris. But whenever I shoot that, I tend to be shooting it wide open. I mean, that's always with fast lenses in this world that we inhabit now with digital cameras. It seems that that is almost like the point of having a fast lens, is to shoot it wide open. I mean, most people don't walk around with a heavy 1.2 50mm lens unless they intend to actually shoot it at 1.2, because otherwise, what's the point of carrying that weight otherwise?
Yeah, I've got an iris.
Wait, no. I disagree. Because I think that extra speed is there if you need it, right? So I think this is partly a difference in mentality between maybe people who shoot rangefinders versus like SLR style cameras or mirrorless. But like, my default is f8, and then if I need more light, or if for some bizarre reason in actual shooting I want to shallower depth of field, then I'm going to open up the aperture deliberately, right? Whereas I think it's the other way round for a lot of other people, where you start wide open by default and then stop down only if necessary. But I mean, that's totally legitimate. If you're shooting portraits and stuff, there's a strong case for a shallower depth of field. But I think if you're trying to shoot a scene where you pretty much want as much in focus as possible, having the faster aperture is just, if you go indoors or you're shooting film at night, and you need 1.4, you need f1.2. It's really nice to have.
Robbie J told me a really good story this week at the shop about I think it was his I want to say it was his wife and his daughter or something like that, had these pictures taken, and they were in like a state park or something with this beautiful background, mountains, blah blah in the background, and they had someone pay to take portraits of them. And they shot them all wide open at 85mm at f1.8. So there's just mush in the background. So the whole point of being in this, going to this place and having this beautiful background was just, it could have been in your, just stand in front of one of those printed backdrops. I mean, you could just, like you're in a photo studio. It wouldn't matter because it's all just nothing, because it's just wide open.
Well, yeah, I've said it before, and I still believe it to be the case that super fast lenses on SLR cameras, I'm certainly not talking about rangefinders now. The main point of having those was to enable you to get your focus point more easily. Yes. Because it's allowing more light through. It means that your split screen is going
brighter
to work more
viewfinder
effectively.
Right, yeah,
so
absolutely.
Therefore it's easier to get the focus, and then you would stop down and get the shot how you would want it. And most people back in the day weren't shooting portrait shots at 1.2. They would stop them down to a sensible amount so you can actually get more than one eye in focus and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And for all practical purposes, there are so few situations where you need faster than f1.4. Like light doesn't change, right? So f2 is good enough for pretty much all situations, except for those really low light situations where 1.4 is necessary. But unless you're chasing Bigfoot in a forest, f1.2 is just showing off at that point, right?
Yeah. But there is a different case though with very fast rangefinder lenses, and that's because the lenses themselves are that much smaller to start off with. I mean, a fast rangefinder lens is going to be lighter than the equivalent SLR lens by design. So you don't have. The sale was complaining about the fact that you got this big lens, and why carry a big lens when you can carry a smaller lens, and when you never really need to be shooting at 1.2, for instance. Whereas you haven't really got as much of an issue doing that with a rangefinder lens and a rangefinder camera. So you can, that extra bit of weight that you're actually having over another lens, well, it still isn't actually in relative terms that heavy. So, well, why not have the extra flexibility, which is sort of what you're saying, I think.
Yeah.
John, that was to Perry. That was to Perry. That was.
Yeah, that was to Perry. That's what I want to jump. Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. I don't think that was the point I was trying to make, but that does make sense. I mean, like a Canon 51.2 LTM is no bigger than a 51.4 SLR lens.
Right. But I wouldn't want to use that. I wouldn't want to carry that lens every day. Mm-hmm. It's big, and on a rangefinder, it's gonna at least partially block the viewfinder. It's just too much. It's unnecessary. It's superfluous.
Yeah, and it unbalances the camera, right?
Right.
Part of the point of carrying a rangefinder is your body is pretty small. So when you put a lens on that might be small by SLR standards, it's still gonna make your rangefinder quite front heavy. Yeah. And block the viewfinder, as Johnny says. So it's I would only put one of those on my camera if I knew that I was likely to need the speed, or if I wanted the special look that lens gives.
Right.
Oh, but maybe Simon, you're right. Everyone needs a Noctilux because they're small.
Well, I've got a 7 Artisans 51.1 supplied by Hamish Gill of 35mmC shop. He's not paying me to say that, but there you go. It's a really nice lens, and there's a bit of a lead in there to what I've been up to this week. So I'm not going to talk about that lens until we get onto what I've been up to this week. So we'll I'll park that conversation there. Perry, is there anything else you've been up to this week?
Nope, not really.
Okay, well let's head over to Chicago then. And how about you, Johnny?
Well, other than starting my week off immediately after the last podcast with shooting not 10, not 12, but I think like 17 pictures with the Primaplan 58 1.9 on my Fuji digital, almost all of them at or near wide open. I've been up to nothing really.
Well, I was going to say we've slightly jumped ahead of what we were going to talk about there, but I think we should.
I had to come up with something to make it sound like I did anything.
Well, you did, and it's pretty remarkable work, and I think let's go straight into it because we've got these challenges which we're going to talk about a little bit more about, the one for me and the one for Perry. But let's dive. Seeing that Johnny has done nothing else this week, let's talk about that for Johnny. And that was that we've made you or shamed you into going out with your Primaplan and your Fuji, and you posted the results. I think you actually posted it before last week's podcast actually went live, which was really confusing for people. I think.
I actually went out immediately after the podcast since we needed some images for the podcast cover artwork. I went out immediately and shot those images before the podcast was ever even posted. So I got that out of the way. It was a beautiful day. And you know what? It did make me realize something about, shall we call it oofda photography when I was doing that bit of work last week. It made me realize that I actually really kind of enjoy shooting that way, but not for the images.
Yeah.
I had a great time walking around. It was sunny and looking at flowers and looking at bugs and getting real close to them. And,
Squirrels.
I could smell the milkweed, and it was a nice experience. And I enjoyed that experience far more than I enjoyed the resulting photographs. So for that reason alone, it was a very worthy use of my time, because I got out and I got to just spend some time in my beautiful Chicago alley with nature. So it was.
I've got to say, I think your time of being one with nature was well spent.
Thank you very much, Simon.
It was, and I mean, you can see that on the comments that you've got there as well. But your shots are great. I mean, you've been dissing this lens for however long now, and your shots are great. I mean, there's nothing to complain about. Yeah, they've got character, they're interesting, and odd things are going on, but the odd things that are going on are looking good. You've got subjects in there. Your bokeh's not, in most cases at least, distracting from the scene.
Only because the Fuji helped me crop away all the garbage that would have been there if it was on a full frame camera. So there's that.
Wait, but you kept saying last week that the lens sucks on the Fuji.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't, though, does it?
I don't know. That's a subjective statement now, isn't it? That's a very subjective statement. I don't know. I mean... No, it was nice. It performed really well. So I have two of these lenses, and this one that I shot, I have it. It's still attached to my Fuji, so I can talk about it. This one that I got both of my Prima plans for like pennies on the dollar. As a matter of fact, I got them at Central Camera Company because they were attached to nasty old. I try to remember what they were attached to, but they were attached to just junked cameras. And both of them were kind of a mess. And this lens right here that I took these images with, it had fungus. It had all kinds of crap in there. It's got coating damage inside. So some of the coating is missing, like in the center optical area. But the lens is clean, and I had it overhauled, so it's really smooth and it works great. But it is very much a compromised lens. So those images are shot with this lens. I have another one that's the older version. There's like a fatter version and a slimmer kind of version of the Prima Plan 58. But this was shot with a fatter one. So no, I mean, I considering that, and I did of course have a big old lens hood on it, but considering all that, I think it performs really well. It's not too bad. You know what? All right. Here's part of what I have against the Prima Plan, is that the last time I used it, it's when I was briefly flirting with using a focal reducer. And this lens with a focal reducer on the Fuji was just complete garbage. Like nothing was in focus because it's got a really weird optical design, as we know, designers on crack, right? So it has a really weird optical design, and you pair that with a focal reducer, and a focal reducer just does not play nicely with this lens. So, number one, I'm not a fan of focal reducers. Number two, this lens has a crazy design, and you match all that up together, and my experience with those two things was less than pleasing. So this was a far more pleasing experience shooting it this time around.
So do you think you might go out with your Fuji? Excuse me. There's a bit of the Stranglers going on now.
Phone's ringing, dude.
Yeah. That's it. The Stranglers are really going to kick in there. There we go.
No.
Oh yeah. So no, I've just remembered the question I've asked you now. So I'm going to ask you again, just in case you didn't hear that question correctly. Are you going to go out shooting with your Fuji again?
Probably next year. No,
just think what you had an enjoyable experience out there.
I did, and next time I'm going to do it with my TLR instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the experience had very little to do with the lens, right? Like he could have gone fishing and had the same.
That's kind of my point.
One.
No, I actually I fundamentally disagree with that. I think the lens has a huge amount to do with enjoying your experience. And
No, I'm just being a wise guy. It was very nice because, like I said, I was really close to I was using the getting back to my Fuji. I had the lens mounted on a helicoid on an original Pentax, the old school variable close focus ring. So I was really right close up on stuff to get really, really super shallow depth of field, super close to the subject. And so I was like right on top of the stuff I was shooting. No, and it was really a nice experience to just be doing that. But would I have had the same experience with a different camera? Maybe not. I mean, and shooting on the Fuji, I've always said this, that the best focusing experience I've ever had on any camera of any type is using the Fuji, because the EVF is great and it's really easy to get critical focus. I mean, like ridiculously easy. So I have no complaints about the way the Fuji performs in that matter. I mean, I wish focusing on everything was that easy.
They're so good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I have no complaints there whatsoever. I mean, I can nail focus every 95% of the shots with no problem. So it was a great experience from that standpoint, and totally instant gratification. I walk right back inside and got the pictures done, and the whole thing took me an hour. So it was great from that standpoint, but it's just, I wouldn't want to do that. It's not. It was great to be able to do that, but it's not the way I would want to do it most of the time, if that makes sense. It's not usually what I'm doing.
Can you do it again, but try to get some swirly primaplan bokeh with like foliage in the distance, but do it stop down?
You know what? In that case, I ought to just take out. I have other lenses that will swirl way more than this thing will. I mean, I could try. I'm sure I could get some shots like that. Yeah.
Actually, didn't you mentioned last week you were going to take some shots with that? Was it a Taylor Hobson lens?
Oh, I did actually. I did. Yeah. And actually, the cover for the last podcast is a shot with the Hobson.
Ah, right. I didn't. For some reason, I thought that was with the primer plan, and I was looking for that shot. I didn't put two and two together there. Okay.
Yeah, that shot is with the crazy Hobson, the Kodak Ectacolor. The original. The Kodacolor process. That photo is from that. So actually, I have more of those photos. I could post. I'll post some of those up as well. If people really want to see some swirls, I'll post those.
Yeah,
was that from last week?
Yeah.
Oh, so it wasn't one of the old ones from like years ago.
No, that I went out and shot those at the same time I shot the Primaplan.
Oh, cool. No, I assumed it was old.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's a pretty remarkable shot, and it's worth talking about in itself, because it looked, apart from like the incredible swirl and field curvature and all sorts of things going on there, it looks like the light that's going in there is being split up into its constituent parts around the edges as well.
Yeah, well, it has, because the I'll just post a photo of the lens itself, because it has that tricolor filter in front of the lens, so it's a lenticular process. So it's striping the image, red, green, blue, essentially, going into the camera, and then you would project it with the same filter, and that's where the color comes from.
So it doesn't work like the old black and white tellies where you get a piece of plastic and put a green bit at the bottom and the blue bit at the top for your television.
It's sort of, in a way, yeah, actually, because it's except it's doing it with three colors. It's doing it with the three colors that make up the way we see color in a projected, process like that. So no, it looks exactly like that. I mean, it's literally a red, green, blue, a divided into 3 parts filter in front of the lens. So that's why it looks so crazy when you see it. A straight photo with it. That's why it looks so strange. And if you look at it closely, yeah, you absolutely see the weird kind of like split spectrum color thing going on. Well, I'll post some pictures of the lens. It's hard to describe. It's much easier if you actually see the lens itself.
Well, I've got to say, well done anyway, because you've completed
thank you
the challenge there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And how those Tesla shots go, Simon?
Well, let's talk about those in a minute. Because I've been up to a couple of things this week, and then we'll segue into that eventually. I'm sure we will, because it may actually form a large part of the show. And what have I been up to this week? Not a huge amount. Although I was out yesterday. No, telling lies. On Wednesday. No, Friday. Yeah, like this really matters for a podcast which day it was I did these things. Let me
try to remember which day it was that I didn't shoot my Tessar. Oh wait, it was every day.
Yeah, it was. Although I did some Tessar shooting on Friday because I went out with my baby Rolly, which has got a 60mm Tessar in, which obviously doesn't count.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I went out and I finished a roll. The roll of film was on that. I think I took about four shots. So I wasn't actually sure how many shots I would get out of a roll. But it turns out it's 12. Just in the same way as for a Rolleiflex, you would get 12 shots, or a 6x6 on a Hasselblad or whatever. So that's done, and hopefully I'll get those images processed. The film processed tomorrow at the 6 darkroom, along with my completed roll in my Leica, my M2. It's
done.
Yay!
Yeah, it was. While I was out, the bells started ringing as I couldn't wind it on any further. And the final shot that I took with it was actually the only shot I took with it, because I wasn't sure if I'd actually set the what do you call it that tells you how many shots you've taken.
The counter.
The counter, yeah. Because on the M2, it's got a cheapened frame counter, so you have to manually set it when you actually put the film in the camera, whereas the things like the M2 and the and the others from there, it's an automatic process, so it just does it for you. But so if you don't set it correctly in the first point, then you can't really trust the information that it's giving you. And because it was so long, I couldn't remember if I did it right or not. But it turned out I actually did it right first time, which I'm quite pleased about. So I went and I thought, well, I'll just take a photograph, and I just took a photograph of some stone steps, and then it wouldn't wind on. So that one frame has been waiting to be taken for about 4 months. But there you go. So that's done, and again, I'm going to get that processed tomorrow, I think. Actually, that's the point. While I've got the two of you, the roll that I'm talking about is Fuji 400 CN, which is designed for C41. So it's like XP2 or whatever number they're on these days with that one. But you can develop it in conventional black and white chemistry as well, I believe. I've seen people doing it, but it's my question is would I be better just taking it to the mini lab and get it done at C41, or do it in Rodinol or D76 or ID11 or any one of those things, which I could just do tomorrow at the darkroom?
I would drop it off. I would take it to the lab. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's cheap enough anyway, so I can get it done for £3. So and then and then scan it myself. So okay, I might just do that and drop it in tomorrow.
Hey Simon, what did you actually shoot with the Rollie?
Street.
Oh wow!
yeah.
Stoked?
No. I know. I ventured away. I was out with a friend and we were trying to set up some shots. It was as much a reconnaissance trip as I wanted to get some. I planned on doing some shots with large format of some farm buildings and things like that in the countryside. And the friend of mine says, yeah, I quite fancy coming along with that. He's not a film shooter, but he thought, well, the subject matter was of interest, so we thought, well, we'll go along together and see if we spot something, which ultimately we didn't. But we ended up in a town called Macclesfield, which is quite a nice place. And we were there for about an hour, and I got a few shots off, and enough to finish the roll. I don't think they're particularly spectacular, but I don't think that's the point really. I mean, one of the main things is I just wanted to finish my first roll in that camera just to make sure the thing works as much as anything. Mm-hmm. So fingers crossed. In fact,
cool.
I'm going to be debating with myself whether or not I'm actually going to keep that camera or not, because I think the reason why I want that camera is because it's just lovely, but I've already got a roller cord, and it's easier to deal with 120 film than it is to deal with 127 film, and there's plenty of there's more advantages overall with 120, and the camera is not that much bigger, my roller cord, compared to the Rolleiflex. It doesn't look anywhere near as sexy, and I'm just wondering what the benefits would be of actually keeping that Rolleiflex over the roller cord. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
With the 127?
Yeah.
I mean, none really, other than if you just they're cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, sexiness factor. That's
yeah, and it is. It's lovely. It's
you can
gorgeous.
You send it to me if you don't want it. I'll take it. I got a whole freezer full of 127 film. I'll shoot the hell out of it, Simon.
Yeah. Actually, that's a point. Ian Fleming offered me some as well the other day as well, so that's going to make. Oh dear. Yeah. We'll see what the pictures come back like. And if there's something special about that format versus 120, then why not? But we'll see. But it's just lovely, and it's just lovely to use.
Yeah.
It's a sweet little thing. So.
Yeah.
So that's. Oh, and one more thing. I did do some shooting yesterday. It's not truly classic lenses stuff, really, but it was. I took out my Horizon 202 for the first time, which is a panoramic Soviet panoramic camera. One of the later ones, because they used to make them in metal, and this is a plastic one. But unlike many of the plastic Zeniths and things like that, which look hideous in my opinion, this actually still looks like it's a nice, modernish looking, reasonably well made camera. So took some panos, and I don't actually know how many shots I'm going to get out of that one, but with the 36 roll. But anyway, I'll do something with that.
Did it seem to be feeding nicely and functioning well?
Yeah,
nice.
It did. Loading it was fun. Yeah, I mean, I think this is actually the reason why I didn't take it on holiday to Madeira, because I thought to myself, I think literally just before going to the airport, I thought, I'll just stick a roll in that 202 and I'll take it with me. And then I opened it up and thought, that's not normal.
Wow. Yeah.
And so the roll sort of goes around in different directions and bends back on itself, and when it actually on the take up spool, it takes it up backwards, the opposite way around, so emulsion side out, which is something you're not really used to. But actually putting the film and attaching it to the take up spool, you've got to be really careful to do that, because you've got to get that tight. Otherwise, if it's not tight, it's going to interfere with the winding sprocket, if that's the correct term, that actually pulls or guides at least the film around, because it would then be perfectly placed to start ripping into another piece of film that's going in the opposite direction. That's a bit tricky. And if I hadn't spotted the potential of what was going to go on there, then I just would have wrecked the film very, very quickly. Or at least I wouldn't have wasted too much film, but it would have gone wrong within the first 3 shots probably.
Yeah.
I think it's worth just quickly explaining to any listeners who have no idea what we're talking about, what this camera does. Because it's a panoramic camera, but it's not like an X-Pan where it's just like normal. The lens does this like sweeping motion, right?
Yeah.
And it moves in a curved motion to take the picture. And then when you load the film at the back, it's also a curved film back. So you have to kind of like bend the film when you're loading it instead of loading it straight. So it's very strange.
Yeah. The other thing about it is it doesn't have you can't focus the lens, but it's a 28 mm 2.8, so it will have a minimum focus, although 28 millimeters is still your depth of field is going to be pretty significant. So as long as you're not going to be too far away, too close to something, the chances are you're going to be able to get most things in focus. But what I also realized that I decided to put some 400 film because it was quite dull to go where I was going. And then when I got out, it brightened up a little bit. And then I realised, oh dear, I've got problems now, because when the sun did come out, I was immediately at f/16 because the fastest shutter speed on there is 250th of a second. So a little bit of planning or thought going into what film I was going to use would have done me some good there, because 100 or even 50 film would have been more appropriate for my shooting, because I hate actually going down all the way to f/16 because of potential diffraction. Although I suppose it's questionable whether really that's that much of an issue on film. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't usually stop down that far, but I mean, I don't know. It can work in certain situations too.
Yeah, well, for me, it was I had no choice because I think he actually wanted me to be shooting at say at f/11. I would need to be shooting somewhere about 750th of a second or something like that. Right. Yeah, so I just had to go to f/16 and shoot at the fastest speed, which was 250, and that was it. That was my choice.
I don't think with that lens being diffraction limited is going to be a big problem.
No.
And not with 400 film either, for that matter.
Yeah.
And that's 400 film that expired in 2002. Do you think that was not? That's the least of my worries, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's pretty low on the list of things that might degrade your image quality and that. So Simon, you have shot. Let me get this straight. You've shot street photography this week. You've shot with a Leica this week, and you've shot panos.
Yeah, and I didn't think I'd done anything.
Exactly. So you did everything possible to do everything you could, except for.
I know where this is going.
Yeah, where the Tessar shots at.
Well, yeah. Let's come back to that one, because I think what we need to do before we talk about that one, because again, if we talk about Tessars, it will take us somewhere else, and I don't want to go there just yet. So let's do Perry and a bit of an update on the cheap lenses for Perry challenge, because we had that poll last week, and I think I've just lost it now. I had it on my page earlier. But anyway, I'll try and remember what the results are. But we narrowed last week's show. We narrowed down the 3 lenses for Perry that he's going to, which one of which is we're going to buy for Perry to use, and then ultimately give it away after he's liked it. And the options that we gave were the Myroptic Domiplan, the Yashica Yashinon 50F2, and the Konica Hexanon AR 40 1.8. You know what? I just feel like I need to say something there, because I just said Hexar as opposed to Hexanon, and just one of those things about that's just going around in my head, that's Hexar, because you can get Konica Hexars as well as Hexanons.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that the Hexars are their budget range and not necessarily even made by Konica. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that one.
I don't know. I associate the Hexar with the AF and the RF.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was going to say too.
which are definitely not budget.
No, that's it. Well, I'm talking specifically about
You mean the
SLRs.
lenses with Hexar written on them?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so I may or may not be wrong. It'll be interesting if anyone can pass comment on that. But I'm pretty sure that the SLR lenses that say Hexar are of a lower specification than the ones that say Hexanon. Certainly the the 35 3.5 Hexar that I had once was truly awful. So certainly I've had the Hexanon, although that was a 2.8, and that was a stunning lens. I mean, it's a I'm pretty sure it's the equal of a Flatigon. But the Hexar less impressed, and I don't think it's as good. But anyway, putting that to one side, the third lens, as I've just mentioned, there's the Konica 40mm f1.8, and the results were, which I haven't got in front of me, but I think it was like 3% for the Domiplan or Domiplan, and then it's like about 16% for the Yashinon, or was it a bit more than that? None of us have got this up, have we?
I don't know what percent. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just make another percentage up there for the winner. Was the Konica Hexanon, which had much more than the other two. It was easily an easy winner. Perry, at some point when I can actually find one at the right price, because since we last spoke, I've now realised that these lenses are not that cheap anymore. I don't know if it's anything to do with that show or not. I don't know, but
that's what I mentioned last time, that in Hong Kong they're actually not very cheap on the used market. But I did pull up the poll, by the way. It was 6 votes for the Domiplan, 19 votes for the Yashinon, and 36 votes for the Hexanon.
There you go. So pretty resounding win there for the Konica. And as we were chatting earlier, Johnny was suggesting that people were voting for the lens that they were hoping that they were going to be winning in a few weeks.
It's a reasonable strategy.
It is, yeah.
Somebody go and get it.
Yeah, based upon that, I think I might have voted that way as well. Although actually, no, I wouldn't, because I've already got one. So I would have voted for the Yashica, which I think is actually a cracking lens. But all three lenses have got something going for them. But there will be a Hexanon heading to Hong Kong in the near future.
And well done just now for pronouncing Yashica correctly.
Oh, did I
nailed it.
And now you've told me now, I'm going to forget. So I said Yashica, as that's opposed to Yashica, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah, because I usually say Yashica. So I said Yashica, there you go. You're obviously a good influence on me. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the updates on those challenges, except for the Tessar bit, which is my bit, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And it's quite predictably, it still hasn't been going very well. And actually, I've got an excuse, because I did say the last week I would get my Contax lens, the old Contax lens from I think it's a 1930s lens, so 35 2.8. Is it 35? Yeah, 35 2.8. No, it's a 50. It's a 50. Sorry. Obviously, if it was a 35, there'll be nothing wrong with it, and it'll be fine. But no, it's a 50mm, and I wanted to use it, and then I realised that I've got a problem with my adapter. It's actually something. It's one of these adapters that was made out of a dead Kiev camera and sent over to me from Ukraine, and I lent it out to somebody, and it came back in the post, and it must have taken a knock because it wasn't adjusted correctly. I've got this Orion lens somewhere, and I couldn't actually mount it on the adapter, and I realised that it was knocked out of alignment. And looking at how it's adjusted, it's just the quality of the screws that were used in the construction to actually put the thing together as an adapter was pretty poor. So I've just decided to get another one. So I've actually ordered one now for a couple of weeks ago, but it's taken a little bit of time to actually get to. So when that arrives, then I may well do that. But this brings on to the next part, and that's why quite possibly some people are actually listening to this podcast who don't normally listen to the podcast, because I've put out a trailer about one of the things that we're going to be talking about, and this came about because we were just having a chat about what we were going to do, and Perry suggested, why don't we do something on Contax Yashica? And that night I went to the Six Towns Darkroom, and the guy that pretty much runs the event there, Brian Truman, is a big Contax fan, and I'd contacted him earlier about saying, could you bring a couple of Contax bits with you? I was just curious to have a look at an ST, I think it was, or an RTS that he'd got, and he just decided to bring all of his Contax gear with him, and it was like, oh wow. And one of the items that he brought with him was the 45mm Tessar, which I've owned one before in the hope that it'll be like the holy grail of 45 to 50mm Tessars and actually be good. But I bought one and used it, and it pretty much left me cold like most of them do. But it's a really tiny lens. But not only had he brought that with him, he'd also bought a Contax AX as well. And that is the chubbiest 35mm camera I think that probably exists, in at least in one that's formatted like a conventional one, because obviously you get like the Rolleiflex. Is it the SL? No, it's not SL35, but there's a Rolleiflex that's that's the same kind of shape as like one of the medium format cameras with a removable back. So as far as a conventionally shaped 35mm camera, I can't think of a chubbier one than
the only other one I think that is like the AX is fat. The other one that comes to mind is the Leica R8.
Oh yes,
which is a far inferior camera, but equally obese.
Yeah, and this is the thing. The AX has got a reason for being fat. Has the R8 got a reason for being as big as it is?
Yeah, it's a Leica SLR. We don't Leica's design approach to SLRs. I don't know. Just make it big; it'll look impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I've got this AX sitting there in front of me, and there was a Tessar, and I just had to put the two things together because they just look ridiculous. And I've shared the picture on Instagram and a few places, and the our Facebook group for the podcast at least, and people have got nuts over it because it just looks so ridiculous. As Mike Novak commented, it's he accused me of doing the fat guy in the small car gag with it, and it's yeah. But Tessars, this particular Tessar on a Contax AX, it's a revelation. Because what people many people won't realise why the Contax AX is as huge as it is, especially seeing that it's to all intents and purposes a manual focus 35mm camera, and the party trick of this camera is the fact that it will autofocus a manual lens natively. And for people might be wondering, well, how does that actually occur? And it's hard to actually explain because I still haven't quite got my head around it. But because it's got internals in there that actually move the film plane, so it's almost like it's got a built-in extension tube in the camera, which is why it's got that extra bit of depth. So it must actually be moving the film. But when I've seen pictures of the internals moving, it seems to move things in a slightly different way, and it doesn't actually push the lens in and out. It's doing something at the film plane. So if there's anybody clever out there who can explain that better than me, then I'll be I'm all ears on that one. But
moving. Sorry, can I jump in on that real quick? Moving the film plane is. There are quite a lot of like old medium format folding cameras, like the original Mamiya 6s, which move the film plane back and forth. Yeah. But the thing that makes the Contax AX pretty incredible is that it's doing this in an SLR, right? So it's also, whatever is happening is also translating itself to the viewfinder via the mirror. And I mean, I've tried one and it works really well.
Yeah, and this is it's got another little party trick with it as well. I'm just going to go into that mode right now, and this is what made me have a positive experience with this ridiculously small lens on this massive camera. Is that it apart from autofocusing things, which I'll come on to a little bit more detail in a moment. It's got a macro mode, so effectively you can. It extends. I'm just wondering, actually, does it autofocus as well? No, I don't think it does. But yeah, it extends the film plane, so it reduces the minimum focus distance. So you can turn just about, certainly most lenses, and certainly the shorter the focal length, the more of an effect that this will have. And you can get immediately much closer to subjects. So I could go down, if I wanted to take my flower shots with this camera, I could do it with this lens, which has got a normal minimum focus of only 60 centimeter minimum focus distance, which is utterly unremarkable. But bang it into macro mode, and just trying to work out what it is. It's around about 20 centimeters. So
yeah,
which is remarkable.
What it's doing there is there's an entire internal assembly that encompasses the viewfinder prism and the mirror and the film plane, and that entire internal assembly is shifting position when you're moving it to macro focus mode.
Yeah, I mean you can hear it shifting when it's doing it there, and but it seems that it doesn't actually autofocus now. That's fine.
Do it like this to verify. If you take the lens off and then shift it, you should see like the mirror and the stuff attached to the mirror physically move backwards.
Okay, let's see. Bingo.
Yeah.
And I would say it's probably about maybe 10 mil of movement going on there as it goes.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about a centimeter. Yeah. That's why it's so fat, because the whole thing has to move.
Yeah. So I'll just play that noise just for our listeners. Here we go. There you go. How exciting is that? As I'm talking over the noise. There you go. Remarkable podcasting there. But yeah, it's I'm knocked out with it. And the other thing about it is not, as you might expect, it's not a light camera, and many of the later Contax cameras are just simply not light cameras. So it's a big camera, but it's a big camera for a reason. It is doing something, apart from the fact it's got a motor wind built into it as well, which obviously takes up some space. But there's a huge bit of mechanics going on there that needs space to move and things to move into. So there is justification for its size.
Mm-hmm. And it has a tracking AF as well, right?
Well, I'm not sure about tracking, but certainly continuous at least. Anyway.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's so single AF, and I mean how effective these are is another matter. But I'm just wondering if because Johnny's been very, very quiet, because I know that you've got some opinions on these, and I don't know if I've already headed some of your objections off already or not. But let's bring Johnny in for this part of the podcast now.
I just can't. It's such a Rube Goldberg thing with a Contax name on it. I can't. I'm sorry.
A what thing?
The AX. It's.
Those machines where like the ball goes in and then the ball moves around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a Rube Goldberg machine.
It's just an unnecessary solution to that sort of problem.
No. I think you're wrong, because the lenses are so sweet that to be able to autofocus the Contax Ishika lenses, which we'll talk about later on, the lenses, it's worth it. I mean, if someone could figure out a way to do this on a rangefinder, I would buy that tomorrow, while maintaining the rangefinder coupling. And
I mean, I don't know. I guess.
Well, okay. Well, when I've laid eyes on this, when I've laid eyes on this camera in the past, I've looked at it, and even though I'm a Contax fanboy, I've looked at it and think that is just ridiculous. It's just way too big for its own good, and the AF is going to be pretty poor, and so on and so on. And not only that, I'd need to do weightlifting just to pick the thing up, and it's really quite surprised me because it is not as heavy as I was expecting it to be. Yes, it's a big camera, and and it weighs a bit. It's a kilo, I think, something like that. So it's not a light camera. But I just think for the fact that it is actually doing something with its size, I can forgive that. And they've clearly made some kind of efforts not to make the thing as heavy as it could be. I mean, you certainly pick this up and compare it to, say, an RTS 3, which is another one of Johnny's favourite cameras. It's lighter than an RTS 3.
Does it not have 6 AA batteries in it or something?
No, that could be one of the reasons why it doesn't. It uses that. I think, is it called a 2CR5?
Oh battery, yeah, okay. Those are light. Yeah, they're big, but they're light. Exactly.
Yeah. The camera makes me think of Meghan Trainor's song "All About That Bass." I mean, it's chunky, but it gives you something to hold on to. So ergonomically, it's surprisingly good.
Yeah. Well, let's just talk a little bit about the autofocus, because it is autofocus, but not as we know it, because there has to be a trade-off. I mean, how do you have a manual focus lens that you can autofocus? And as you know, it's all down to that movement of the film plane, but that movement might not be enough to cover the minimum focus to infinity. So you still need to actually give it some help. So one of the ways you could do this is to focus it manually, and then, I mean, it's got back button focus. I mean, I'm just I mean, how cool is that? On a film camera from that era, back button focus.
I like that we have two completely opposite reactions to the same thing.
Yeah. Jesus.
What's wrong with I mean, we don't talk about autofocus on the show for good reasons, but I want to know what your problem is with back button focus there, Johnny.
I don't. First of all, I just don't like sticking my thumb up my nose to focus my camera. It's just not necessary.
No, man. But if you are going to use autofocus, you want to separate the focus and the shutter release button, right? And so back button autofocus is objectively the better way to autofocus.
But I don't. But see, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, neither do I.
But even when I use autofocus, I don't want that. I don't want to do that because I'm just going to focus and recompose. So I don't need to do that.
Are you using your left? Right, exactly. Are you using your left eye, Johnny?
No, I use my right eye.
So how'd you put your thumb up your nose then with using your right eye? It's too far away. I'm just trying to work out the position about how you might do that.
No, I'm making a general statement on back button focus that I don't want to do anything with my hands on the back of the camera.
But if you're gonna focus and recompose, that's another argument for back button focus.
No, it's a great argument for focus and recompose as being just fine.
No, because I know, but if you focus with the back button, right? Then when you press the shutter, it's not going to refocus. Whereas if you use the shutter button to focus and shoot, then by the time you've locked focus, if for some reason you forget, you take your finger off the button, then I mean, this is why autofocus is lame. But exactly, autofocus again when you have press. So if you are going to autofocus, I do think back button is the best way to do it, because why would you take two? You don't have an aperture and a shutter ring in the same dial, right? So why would you take, well, some cameras do, but why would you take the two of the most important functions on a camera and put them on the same button? It doesn't make sense.
I don't. It makes sense to me. I don't know. It's the way to me, it's fine. It's fine. I'd rather have it just one in one. I'd rather have it all in one than in two separate places. I don't want to do anything on the back of the camera with my hands other than put my face on the back of the camera. That's it.
What about advancing film?
I don't typically do that with my eye to the camera either. I mean,
that's fair enough.
I just typically don't. But even that's on top. It's not like it's not my thumb like basically like next to my nose on the camera on the back. I just can't do it. It's just an ergonomically stupid operation to me. I'm fine with focus and recompose. I'm totally fine. And I'm just holding focus to just holding it to the point and then release it. I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that.
I'm quite amazed by that because as a manual focus lens shooter, focus and recompose is just alien to me, because that's like one of the big advantages of shooting manually, because you put it into the position, you get it into focus, and you take the shot.
Wow.
And you can
not if you're using a rangefinder.
Well, there you go. Yeah, there's somewhere we need to go on to that one. I think we'll get into there. But yeah, that's quite surprising. But I'm certainly I converted to back button focus for when I used a Nikon for wildlife shooting. So I was well impressed with this. But the point being is that you still need to manually focus, or you have to have some level of manual focus to in certain situations. But what this would help you with is in a situation that Perry had earlier on this week, where it was missing the focus around about the eyes. It was almost getting things in focus. Whereas with this, I can pretty much get the focus right. But if I would have the option just to press that little button, and it would zip that tiny amount of movement that will be required to actually truly get the person's face in focus when the lens is wide open.
Yeah. So before we get onto that, the way what Simon's talking about, for anyone who's familiar with the TechArt autofocus adapter for Leica M to Sony, it's pretty similar, where you have to like kind of pre-focus to the right area, and then the autofocus does the last step for you. Well, I mean, now that Simon's mentioned it, so I went out shooting on Saturday. It was my mom's birthday, and I brought a roll of Portra with my Contax S2 and a bunch of CY lenses, because Contax Yashica lenses are my favorite SLR lenses. And I mentioned on a previous episode that I have a secret stash of them. And yeah, I mean, focusing with an SLR is a pain in the butt. I mean, using an AX with autofocus would have fixed that problem, Simon, but so would using like oh my god, I can't believe I'm going to say this. Like, so would using my Sony with like zoomy in button mode. But also, so would using a rangefinder.
Yeah,
and I know people,
but the thing is, using like magnification, that's fine if you've got something static. But I mean, when you're taking a picture of a person, it's zooming in is a bit tricky sometimes, and
yes.
it does certainly would get in the way, and also you could, by the time you've zoomed in and got it right, you may have to still recompose and then press the button, and you can still miss the focus then.
Yes, that's true, but I am quite accurate with a rangefinder, even when it's like close to wide open at like moderate distances. Because like shooting with this SLR was, I love these lenses, but I think I actually, again, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I actually like these lenses better on my Sony. Because shooting them on an SLR, like when you get to that sort of zone of correct focus, there's like a 3 to 5 degree motion on the lens where it's like, I don't know if I'm making it more in focus or less in focus, because it all looks kind of in focus here.
Yeah.
Because at least on the Contax S2 I have, the viewing, what's it called, the focus screen doesn't show the out of focus areas as they appear on the film. It does some weird thing to them, so they appear as these like weird blob-like aberrations. So I literally can't tell when something is in focus versus when something is slightly out of focus. Whereas with a rangefinder, like there's an exact point where it's in focus, and any movement I can see, at least if I'm going off that. So that was not fun. To be fair, most of my shots from that roll were in focus. There were just like 2 or 3 shots that I really liked that were quite far off, and they looked okay to me through the viewfinder when I was shooting them.
So did you find you were taking a different type of photograph because you were using an SLR compared to a rangefinder?
100%. Totally different kind of photograph. Because, I mean, how do I articulate this? When you're looking through the lens wide open, you see the bokeh, right? You see like the out of focus portions. And so that becomes part of the calculus when I'm composing in a much more conscious way. Whereas when I'm shooting with a rangefinder, like you're not looking through the lens, you're just looking through a glass hole, right? And so everything is in focus. And when I'm shooting with a rangefinder, I find that I pay much more attention to the overall composition and the relative positioning of things in my frame. And if there's bokeh or if I have to use a faster aperture, that's just like a welcome or sometimes unwelcome side effect. Whereas with shooting these fast Contax Yashica lenses wide open, it's a completely different experience because there's stuff in the background that I can just ignore because I can oofta it, right? And so that's why I think, my compositions are far superior when I'm shooting with a rangefinder. But at the same time, like I don't consider depth of field to the same degree when I'm shooting with a rangefinder, because when you don't see it, sometimes it's like out of sight, out of mind, right? So a lot of the times when I'm shooting with a Leica on the street, I'll come back, I'll look at my photos, and sometimes I actually think like, oh, you know what? This close-up street candid would have been maybe nicer with slightly shallower depth of field because there's like a garbage can in the background or something, but it just never occurs to me to incorporate that shallow depth of field into the composition. I mean, it harkens back to what I was talking about earlier with the Pentacon, that default desire to shoot at f8 and have everything in focus, and then to add shallow depth of field as a deliberate effect, rather than when shooting with the SLR, that's the default starting point. And you literally have to press the depth of field preview button if you want to see what it's like when it's not wide open. So yeah, that was quite interesting. It was the first time I've shot with a film SLR for quite a while, because like most of the time they're just kind of sitting on my shelf, and when I do shoot with a film SLR, it tends to be medium format. But I was surprised at how it goes back to the thing Johnny keeps saying, right? The camera totally matters. It changes the way you see the world. It changes the way you interact with your photography, and as a result, it changes the way that you shoot. I was taking pictures of individual subjects with the background blurred out because that's what the camera was pushing me to do, which is fun.
There was a photo you put up the other day, and I'm not even sure if it was today actually, but it's like some kind of tram, and you can see the driver and you're shooting head on.
Mm-hmm.
Was
yes.
Was that an SLR shot? No,
that's digital. I shot that on my Sony A7R II with 51.4 planar.
That's it. I've now found the shot now. I think that's a really striking photograph, and for me it's interesting that it was actually taken with your planar, as opposed to with a Leica, because I just wonder if you would have taken that shot in the way that you took it if you were using your rangefinder, because I think the control of the depth of field, it really draws your attention to the subject matter, which is it's what's also interesting about that shot actually is the main subject matter is right bang in the middle of the frame, which is something that we tend to avoid, but it's exactly right in that particular scene.
The rest of the tram I think completes the composition. Yeah. Especially the guy behind the driver. So you do have like the kind of break up of the frame into like maybe 5 different components.
Yep.
I don't know if this shot would have been too different on a Leica, because I think the reason I'm shooting with shallow depth of field is just because it's at night. And so I have my aperture wide open to let in more light. So I think if I was shooting this with a Leica, I would also like open up to f2 or something. But here, the bokeh and the kind of depth of field is something that I'm seeing as I'm shooting. So it is a very deliberate part of the composition, I guess. Like I'm looking at it as I'm composing. Whereas with the Leica, it would be not an afterthought, like a side effect. I would come home, I would look at the picture and go, oh, hey, there's bokeh.
And that's the point you've been making there, that you're encouraged to shoot in a certain kind of way. But I just think in this case, I think the image is stronger as a result of that desire to get the shot in the way that the camera's sort of pushing you towards. But if you've got more of a street scene and there are more people in it, I can see how it could actually hinder you, because you'll be losing interest. Parts of interest in your shot it won't be visible to you while you're composing.
Yeah, if this were during the day and I were shooting it with a Leica, I would probably have shot it at f8, and then all that stuff in the background and the taxi and stuff would be perfectly in focus.
Yeah.
And I think you're right that would have detracted from the shot.
Yeah. So horses for courses, but it's still an interesting one that you can pick up two cameras and come away with different shots simply because of the cameras that you're using, because there's always that thing about it's not about the equipment, it's about the photographer. But for me, you can see very different photographs depending on the kind of the equipment that you go out and use.
Oh yeah.
It's also a test. Yeah, I was going to say it's also a big compliment to you that you can go out with two different types of equipment and come back with great shots which rely upon you using the equipment differently.
Oh, well, thank you. But no, you're right. I mean, like I think if you shoved like a Pentax 6.7 in Johnny's hands and told him to go shoot pigeons on the street, like you would get
like he dreams of.
You would get totally different images, right? I think.
Yeah. Yes, agreed.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about the cameras. I'm sort of slightly hesitant on this because there's another podcast out there that many people that listen to this may listen to, and that's the Classic Camera Revival, and they do deep dives into cameras, and they sometimes go into lenses as well. And when they do the camera stuff, I'm there thinking, yeah, that's interesting. And then they always talk about lenses, and I'm there thinking, oh, you didn't mention that. You could have said this, and so on. Yeah. And now I'm here. I'm talking about cameras, and they're getting, oh, he's forgot to say this, and no, he's wrong on that. And so I'm on my own back for shouting at him in the car occasionally. I talk about some of these cameras, but let's do a quick little bit of history of Contax before we get into the lens stuff. And I'll just bring up my notes, but largely my notes are almost straight out of an article on Casual Photophile by a friend of the show, Cheyenne Morrison, who wrote an article. We'll put links up to this, and it's the actual article is entitled the Contax Aria 70 Years Edition Review. But within that review of that camera, it goes into quite some depth about Contax cameras, the Contax Yashica cameras in particular, not so much the older Contaxes, which many people will certainly class as being real Contax, as opposed to these later ones.
You mean the ones made by Yashica?
Yes.
Or Kyocera, I should say.
Kyocera, yeah.
Well, actually, that was one of the interesting.
or Cosina.
Well, yeah, and that certainly in the later years. Although we're talking more about the lenses than the cameras, but just a quick history of Contax, the Japanese era, shall we say? And I think there was a point where I should have written down the exact camera, but the last made in Germany Contax camera was a bit of a disaster because they were pretty much losing the race in terms of building cameras that could compete with the Japanese, because the Japanese were just they were just moving head. It's a pace. They'd learnt the way that the Germans were making cameras, and they're looking at it and thinking, well, we can do better than this. We can make them lighter, faster, cheaper, and all of those things. And that was exactly what they were doing. So the Japanese were producing better cameras, and they were certainly having a substantial lead on the electronic side of things. And initially, Contax, or the Zeiss, I should say, KARL Zeiss, the West German Zeiss, they were getting very, very cozy with Pentax, and ultimately produced 2 lenses. You've got the Hollywood Distagon, so that's the 28mm f2 KARL Zeiss lens, but you can buy that lens as a Pentax as well, and it actually uses Zeiss optics that were made in Germany and shipped over to Japan and put into Pentax lens bodies. And they also did, I think it was a 15mm. Yeah, 50mm 3.5, and again, it's exactly the same as, at least I believe it to be, the same as the Zeiss lens, but sent over to Japan, and you can get that in a Pentax body. A few years ago, you can actually pick these things up at sensible prices, but people have caught on now, and the days of buying these bargain Hollywood Distagons because they're in a Pentax body are pretty much long gone, unless you're particularly lucky. But for reasons are not particularly clear, then Zeiss didn't continue with Pentax, and they opened discussions with Yashica. I won't say Yashica now, I'll say Yashica.
Well done.
Thank you. And I think one of the reasons why I'm sure there are going to be quite a few reasons, but certainly one of the reasons why they spoke to Yashica was their reputation for electronics and electronic shutters and shutter control, because they were doing very, very good work at the time. Certainly the Electro 35 was a very popular camera that was showed how to do aperture priority in a not really a compact camera, but it's a big thing, but certainly a fixed lens camera. And they also had the ability to make high quality lenses, because at some point prior, the famous Tomioka, the company that we've spoke about on many occasions, were bought by Yashica, and so I'm not too sure if Yashica have always used Tomioka lenses or whether that they made their own. But either way, Yashica came under the same Tomioka came under the same umbrella, and they produced, I think it was about I've lost my dates now, but they ultimately produced the first camera that came together. It was called the RTS, and that was a particularly nice camera for the age where it actually came out. It was quite futuristic. It was designed by Ferry Porsche, the guy behind the Porsche 911. He, at that point, had actually left Porsche and had his own design studio. So whenever you see designed by Porsche, that's the design studio that we're talking about there.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Johnny.
To me, that's usually the hallmark of a camera that is like absolutely shit design. I've just got to say it. Designed by Porsche. Just pull up a list of cameras that have the design by Porsche as a selling point, and they're usually horrendous. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
A general rule of thumb.
Yeah. Except if they say Contax on the label.
Wait. So there are a bunch of cameras, modern and old, designed by like car designers, right? Do you mean specifically Porsche or car designers?
No, probably just specifically by Porsche.
Okay, because I was gonna say the Nikon F3.
Yeah, there's a great example of exactly what I'm talking about.
Wait, you think the F3 is shit design?
I hate the F3.
Wait, sorry, Simon. Can we do a 1 minute?
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's gorgeous.
I mean, it's ugly with a freaking red racing stripe. Seriously?
Okay, like the stripe aside, I agree with you. It's so nice. What are you talking about? That camera is fantastic.
Overrated.
Oh man, whereas for example, Leica they released a M10 Zagato edition, right? Which I think is just the ugliest piece of crap.
But that's not.
Yeah.
But that's not intended to be a real camera. I mean, that's the camera that's bought by those wealthy collectors to sit on the shelf that buy every single camera. That's like what keeps Leica afloat. I mean, the F3 was meant to be an actual user camera.
It is. It's. I mean, it was like the workhorse of photojournalists for.
And I feel so sorry for them that they actually had to make a living with that camera.
Oh man, you're gonna get hate mail for that.
I don't care. It's fine. It's got a horrible viewfinder. Come on.
I think let's put Johnny's attitude into context here. Could you tell us all of the Nikon cameras that you actually think are great? Because it won't take long, will it?
Yeah, the FE and the FM, and that's about it.
Well, there's the F. You like the F as well, don't you? The original one.
Yeah, as long as it's got a standard prism on it and not that idiotic photomic thing.
Yeah. But that's pretty much it. Anything else that Nikon have ever done apart from that?
The F2. Yeah, the F2.
FM2, FM3.
You can keep them all. Yeah, you can keep them all. The FM2 and the FM3 are nice. It's just they should have left the mount on with the flippy lever so you could actually, use more lenses on it. That's my only gripe about those. Those are really nice. But I would take the FE as their best all-around design because it's got an actual. I'm convinced they outsourced the viewfinder to somebody else because it's actually useful. It actually shows all of your shutter speeds, and it shows like it doesn't have just a plus and a minus. It's an actually really great viewfinder. So I'm convinced Nikon didn't design it because they suck at viewfinders.
All right. Back to Contax. Quick.
Yes. Yeah. So car designer Porsche are great. But I think actually when I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in time because I came on board with Contax with the 159, and that marked a change in the design language to some degree. You could still see it was a Contax. You could still see the lineage going back to say the RTS. But what it did, it was shaped. So it had a very, very small thumb grip or finger grip. But it was very subtle the way they actually did it because they moved the body out as well at the same time. So it used a different design language to Canon and Nikon, which after the Canon T90, pretty much every Canon up to today and just about every Nikon owes its design pretty much to the Canon T90. And what I liked about Contax, although back in the day, the T90 had only just come out when I bought my 159. It was nice to know that there was a different design language out there that you can make a camera with brilliant ergonomics and be different from what ultimately everything else looked like to follow.
But okay, so sometimes being different is not a good thing when something works, right? Because we'll get on again. Let's get onto the lenses soon because I think they're amazing. But the Contax bodies like the 159, the RTS, RX. I have one Contax camera. The one Contax SLR. I have tons of other Contaxes. I have a S2, and the reason I like the S2 is it's fully mechanical because all the other ones are electronic and will eventually become paperweights. And B, it's like the ISO dial is in the normal place. The shutter dial is in the normal place. There isn't an extra weird dial by the shutter that I don't know what it does. And yeah, I mean that's good, right? I feel like for me, the S2 is the only Contax body that operates intuitively, whereas all of the other Contax bodies I've tried have some kind of dial that I do not understand how it works. And I have
let me stop you there, because that you're describing the exposure compensation dial, which is in where your thumb is, which is exactly the right place to put that kind of dial on a camera. Because
why is it marked with like fractions?
it's not fractions. It's just plus. It says +1, +2.
No, the 159 has like maybe there's different versions of it, but when I tried it was like it started at 4 and went to like a quarter.
Oh right, okay. Well, they got rid of that because I mean the cameras. I mean that's the thing. We are very very camera heavy this week, aren't we?
Let's move on to lenses quickly.
Yeah, I know. But I've got 4 Contax cameras in front of me. I can't help it. But no, on the my favourite camera has been the RX, and the compensation dial is where normal shutter speed dial will be. But the difference is I can turn that with my thumb and get exposure compensation with my thumb when I use it, like I do with these cameras in aperture priority mode, which is exactly the same mode as I would use my Sony as well, and therefore the exposure compensation dial being readily and easily available on my right thumb is really natural. So that's could be why I actually like Contax and why I like using the Sony, because there are actually some crossovers there that between the two of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, should we talk lenses? Because people have been waiting for this for however long. You've got some pretty damn sexy lenses, Perry. So tell us a bit about the lenses you've got.
Yeah, a little bit of backstory first. My first encounter with Contax Yashica lenses was quite a long time ago. Back when I was shooting Canon DSLRs. And there are two that stick in mind. A while back, when I was first a guest on the show, I mentioned a guy at a fashion show that I was shooting, who was shooting runway with a 100mm f2 planar. And that was actually my first experience with someone using a classic lens for really serious work. And he just kept raving about it. But even before that, in my late teens, so well over, like a long time ago. Well, not as long as it was for you guys, but you know. So I was shooting with I had a Canon DSLR, probably a 5D, and I had saved up a bunch of money from like summer jobs and stuff to purchase my first Canon L lens, which was a 17-40 f4 zoom, and I was like, you know, super pleased that I'd got myself one of these red ring Canon lenses. Canon's marketing team was sitting there like happy with themselves that another sucker had bought into the red ring marketing. And I was perfectly happy with this lens until one day, someone let me borrow their Contax Yashica 21mm f2.8 Distagon, which I promptly slapped on to my Canon because they had an adapter, and took some test shots because, you know, at that stage in photographic development, I didn't know any better, and I was pixel peeping every new lens. And the Contax just smoked my brand new shiny Canon L lens. Like, it just blew it out of the water. And I was like, what? Why is this old lens so much better than my new, you know, swanky autofocus lens? And I was both annoyed but also fascinated. So fast forward to like a couple of years ago from now, I got my first Contax Yashica lens, which was a 51.4 planar, because the Zeiss ZM lenses are my favorite Leica M mount lenses. I love the way they look, and I thought, hey, you know what? I'm gonna buy this lens because it says KARL Zeiss on it, and it feels kind of nice. So yeah, it turns out that was quite a nice lens. Simon, you know, it's your favorite.
Yeah.
And I ended up in a few months after that picking up a 28 2.8 Distagon, an 85 1.4 planar, and a 100mm f2 planar. Because I figure, you know what, I normally like small lenses, but if I'm shooting an SLR, screw it, I'm just gonna, get the nice big fat lens. And the camera didn't come until much, much later, when I was at a shop, actually with a listener of the podcast. And so this was quite recent. And I was talking to the shopkeeper, and I was playing with the Contax AX that you were talking about earlier. And the shopkeeper asked me, like, oh, do you have Contax Yashica lenses? And I was like, yeah, I've got a couple. He asked me which ones. I listed them. And he was like, he looked at me with his blank stare and was like, you don't have a CY camera, but you have those 4 lenses? And I was like, what? What, should I have a CY camera? He's like, yeah. So I was like, okay, you know what? Give me the mechanical one, not this weird autofocus thing. So then I picked up the S2. They are very nice lenses. And before we rave about specific lenses, there's one thing I wanted to add about the AX that I forgot, which is super cool. Because it focuses with a mechanism that's separate to the lens, you can actually adapt other lenses onto it and then give autofocus capabilities on film to other lenses. So I've seen people, for example, take like the optical block from like a Contax G 90mm 2.8 sonar, stick it on like an M42 helicoid, and then mount it to CY, and boom, you got that lens with proper autofocus.
Whoa! I've got to stop you there. That really? I mean,
yeah.
Sorry. I mean, when I'm questioning this, because I'm not questioning the fact that you can use different lenses, because I forgot to mention actually, I put my 100mm f2 Soviet night vision lens on my Contax, but it's got an M42 to CY adapter, and it autofocused, which is just like nuts. This lens was never meant to be on the camera, let alone be an autofocus lens. So that absolutely works, but I don't see how you can possibly put a Contax G lens onto an M42 helicoid.
For that specific lens, the optical design.
Sorry, yeah, the optical block. Sorry, you didn't. It wasn't the actual body of the lens. Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it doesn't stick out at the rear. The glass is very, very far forward on the lens. So with just the optical block, you can then adapt.
Okay, that's cool.
Super cool. So anyway, those are the 4 lenses that I have for CY. I don't know how you want to approach like talking about individual lenses. They're all really good.
Well, it is a thing in itself. And we were chatting about this beforehand, and I know Johnny's got will have some thoughts, but I think with a lot of if you fall in love with a brand, then it becomes very, very easy to say, well, my Leica lenses or my Contax lenses or my Nikon lenses or my Canon L lenses are just the best because it is what it is. And that's probably not the case. I know, Johnny, you've expressed some thoughts on that kind of attitude before.
And just this morning, there's a nice write-up, 35 MMC, kind of along the same lines of the "this is the best" or "that is the best" theory. So that sums it up nicely. Well, I think we should put a link to that.
I think there's some truth to that, because in terms of optical quality, like they're very good, but I wouldn't say, for example, that they blow away like the SMC Takumar 55 1.8 or well, let's be specific here. So I find with these Contax Yashica lenses that I have that their color is wonderful, like all Zeiss lenses. They do not have the 3D pop of my Leica mount, like M mount Zeiss lenses. I don't see it wide open or stop down. And to me, they render quite differently. It's really hard to describe. But there's like they don't have the smoothness of my favorite rangefinder lenses. But at the same time, number one, they handle so nicely. Like these focus rings are far superior to any other SLR lenses that I have. And number two, they have some really interesting optical characteristics. Like the 51.4 is sharp enough wide open, but as you stop it down, it becomes astonishing. Like This thing at f2.8 or something on the Sony is just, the resolution is more than I would ever need. And similarly with the 85 1.4, it's not crazy sharp wide open, but the softness manifests itself in a much less obnoxious way than some rangefinder lenses that are soft wide open and then sharpen up as you stop them down. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting there, because one of the things that these lenses are generally famed for is exactly what you said, that they're not, in your experience, and when you talk about that, about 3D pop, to use that expression. Zeiss lenses are generally well known for it, and there's another term that tends to come out at the cupboard when we talk about these things as micro contrast. That has been spoken about, but certainly a lot of these lenses, it depends on how you're actually using them, because certainly shooting lenses wide open, generally speaking, is not the best way to actually get three-dimensional pop as such. Totally. Because the way to achieve that is to get your depth of field perfect for the object that you're actually, the subject matter that you're taking, so that anything behind it is going to be out of focus to some degree. Whereas if you're shooting wide open, you're only going to get part of the subject that's truly in focus, and then while you're already so your depth of field is going to be really, really tight, so it's going to go to the point where it's sharp, and then it will graduate into the outer focus while it's still on the subject matter that you started off with, if that makes any kind of sense. So shooting wide open is generally speaking not the way to get 3D pop. I mean, you can do it on certain lenses, but they've got to be incredibly sharp, and generally pretty modern. And it's, like some of the Chinese lenses, or perhaps a Olympus 100mm f2. I've not tried the Zeiss, but you can do an environmental portrait and you can isolate somebody because you're that much further away. Your depth of field is a little bit greater, so you can actually achieve the same kind of isolation as you're trying to achieve with when you're trying to get these 3D pops when you're a little bit closer to the subject. So yeah, I find that when you do stop these things down, especially the 50 1.4 and the 85 2.8 sonar, they are capable of incredible 3D pop, if you like.
Yeah, to be fair, I have seen that on these lenses. All I was saying is they don't have it to the same degree as the Zeiss lenses on M mount. But at the same time, I think it might be a function of the particular lenses that I have and their design, and not the CY range as a whole. Because the three longer lenses that I have are all planar designs. And the pictures that I've seen from the 85 sonar and I think the 100mm was also a sonar, to my eye, have more of that sort of 3D look that I like in a lens compared to these planar designs. But I bought the planars because they're faster and sexier. Whereas on the rangefinders, the ZM planar, to my eye, does not pop anywhere near as much as the sonar at the same apertures, and the biogons typically for me have more of that look than the distagons, with the exception of the 35 1.4, which is phenomenal.
Johnny, are you tidying your room at the moment?
He's gone. He's like.
He did say that I haven't really got much to talk about with these Contax lenses, guys. So I wonder if he has actually disappeared. Okay, we'll carry on regardless.
Yeah, he'll be back, and we'll give him a hard time for it. What is that sound?
Oh, that was me with the screwdriver. Sorry, do apologize.
Oh, okay. Okay, I thought that was still Johnny doing something.
I didn't realize you could hear that. There you go. Yeah, no, it was Johnny. Yeah, it wasn't me. Okay, well, all right, let's talk about a few other specifics. Because I've got the 85 planar in front of me, and you've got an 85 planar as well.
Yeah, let me just grab.
I'm curious now, is yours an MM or is it an AE lens?
My 85 and my 50 are AEG, and my 128 are MMJ. So to clarify for our listeners, these CY lenses, the Zeiss ones, they come in 4 different flavors. So the letter at the end, the J or the G, just indicates whether it's made in Japan or whether it's made in Germany. And from my experience, there's no optical difference in optical quality between them. The AE and the MM, there is a difference in terms of the way they interact with the cameras, which, Simon, you can probably talk about because I don't really get the difference. But the other really noticeable difference is the AE versions of the lenses have ninja star shaped aperture. So when you stop down 1, 2, it disappears after you stop down 3 stops. The I guess your bokeh balls won't be perfectly round or even like geometrically shaped. They'll have these weird little ninja stars is the way that they're often described. So yes, I've got the ninja star version of the 85 and 50.
Yeah, and it can be. I mean that's the thing when you're taking some of these shots, it can be very intrusive, either whether it be a hexagon or whether it be a ninja star. And there are some people that prefer one way or the other. I dislike them both ultimately, but I guess I have a preference for the lenses for its just more conventional shaped apertures, which unfortunately on many of these lenses is only 6 blades, that's one of the things that truly annoys me, because I have some matching Nikon lenses that I keep to use on my Sony, and the only reason I have them is because there are times where I want to go out and shoot some shots at night, and I pretty much think that the Nikon lenses, or most of these Nikon lenses, are the equal of the Zeiss lenses, but they have a 7 blade aperture, so you can get 14 points of light on your what do they call them now? Starbursts for points of light. So that's something that really really annoys me about these KARL Zeiss lenses. But the lenses are, as we've talked about, they are the later version, and some of those, and certainly not all of those lenses, have some optical improvements over the earlier AE lenses. But it's got to be said that if you're shooting on film, then I doubt you'll see any difference between an AE and an lens. And frankly, I think you're only going to see a difference on digital if you're pixel peeping, which guys, you shouldn't be doing. Stop pixel peeping. So the functional difference. And you can tell an lens over an AE lens because whatever the smallest aperture is, whether it be f/16 or whatever, on a lens is in green, and that's similar to a lot of lenses of the day when things like programmed apertures started to come in. Where you put the thing into the smallest aperture, and then that would enable something like a program mode or something like that, and it's no different with the contacts. And I think the AE, which one was it? The 159 was, I think, the first Contax that had a program mode, which I never really got my head around. It just seems to me it's almost like a point and shoot mode for using an enthusiast level camera. Never quite understood why people would do that, but it's there, and it's something that's continued. But I think shutter priority, I think that's the other difference. I don't think the AE lenses can do shutter priority, and the difference being is there's a metering pin, an extra little piece that sticks out on the mount of the lens that makes a connection with the camera. On the lenses, and that's just not there with the AE lenses. Another thing, I was talking to Brian Truman, whose collection, I took that photograph with loads of Zeiss porn, and also the owner of most of these cameras and lenses that are in front of me at the moment. He actually prefers the AE lenses, whereas I have a preference for the lenses. And
why?
And he generally views it because he's had more, because he also repairs his own lenses as well, and he's had more problems with the lenses than he has with the AE lenses. So he's pretty much suggesting that they're a little bit, the construction's a little bit better on the AE lenses over the lenses. My view is a completely opposite. Although I don't take lenses apart, it's quite often I'd look at two lenses and it tends to be the AE lenses seem to be showing their age more than the which you could argue, well, they are actually slightly older, so it goes with it. But these lenses, generally speaking, are well looked after. Because the Contaxes yes, they could be used professionally, and the RTS system was aimed at professionals. But generally speaking, professionals back in the day weren't using Contax. They were using mainly Nikon at the time, and to a lesser degree, they were going around with F1s from Canon. So the Contax was a range of cameras that was aimed at the enthusiasts. And frankly, the enthusiasts that have got a bit more money in the pockets as well.
So enthusiasts with a bit more money, these lenses do cost a little bit more than some of the more economical SLR options. But I think there's a couple of things driving that price, apart from just the KARL Zeiss brand. Number one, these lenses are very, very popular for cinema adaptations. And they're really, really popular in that world. But secondly, I find that when you look at the way that they're constructed, the focus rings are very, very well thought out in terms of the throw. So one thing I mentioned on a previous episode is if you look at, for example, hold on, let me grab it. The 28 Distagon, both the Hollywood and the one that I've got. You have a really, really long focus throw from 1 meter to minimum focusing distance, and not much from infinity to 1 meter. Whereas if you compare that to the 50, 85, or 100, it's much more kind of evenly spaced on the focus ring. And I think as a result of that, number one, it gives you a lot of precision when you're shooting close up. And what I've seen from this 28 is, in particular, like this lens, it's well, first of all, for this 28, I bought it because it is one of the lenses where the version is optically better than the AE version. But it's a lens that is really good at far distances and infinity, but it's astonishingly good up close as well. And when we're talking about sort of 3D pop in a wide angle lens, this one totally nails it. And I think the fact that the focus throw is that long, it just enables you to be not only more precise, but if you were to adapt it to shoot video, you also just get a lot more smoothness in your ability to focus on a subject up close. So yeah, handling is important, right? And these lenses really shine in that department.
Well, that's ultimately, and I've said it many times, why my 50mm 1.4 planar is my favourite ever lens, and that's largely because of the way that it handles. I've used optically superior 50mm 1.4 lenses. I will never actually say that lens is the ultimate lens. I mean, some people will do and say that, but I don't believe that to be the case, because I don't think there's actually any one lens that's the best of any particular thing. Unless there's a genre where there's most lenses are rubbish and there just happens to be a good one. But no, I think handling of these lenses is special. We've not talked at all about the other lenses that will fit on a Contax Yashica mount, and that's the Yashica lenses, the ML range of lenses in particular, although there's also the DSB lenses as well, which is the budget range. So there's what's interesting is that there's like 3 levels of lens that you can use with the Contax Yashica mount. And another quick thing that just popped into my head there, because my first camera was a Yashica, and when in the literature for Yashica, the mount wasn't described as Contax Yashica, it was Yashica Contax, so it was YC. I
guess whoever makes it gets to put their name first, right?
Exactly. And I was just thinking, why did they do that? Yeah, they're making the same things. I mean, and a lot of the bodies, especially the earlier ones, when we're talking about the Contax 139s, 137s and stuff like that, they were equivalent Yashica cameras, like the FR and FRD, were all intents and purposes, the same camera, but with a little bit less functionality and not as sexy. But I've got to say, the Yashica lenses, especially the ML lenses, are excellent. They're really, really good lenses, some of which are reputed to be exactly the same or virtually the same as the Zeiss equivalent. And I'm one of those people that's firmly in the camp that the Yashica ML 50 1.4 is the same lens as the planar 50 1.4, and the same goes for the 50 1.7. I'm pretty sure that those two lenses are the same. In fact, actually, generally I prefer the Yashica 50 1.7 to the planar in feel and in the way it looks. And of course, like the 50 1.4 ML, you get 8 blades. It's as if like Yashica were like saying, well, okay, well, we've got your lens and now we're going to make it better. And you can go out and you can buy that lens for less than half the price of the planar. And when I've done pixel peeping between the two of them, and I've done some specific tests, I'd swear that the Yashica is a sharper lens, or certainly compared to mine at least anyway. Not that I kept it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't handle quite as well as my favourite lens ever. Which actually, you mentioned something else the other week about you bought that 50mm planar ZM planar for your Leica because you wanted a lens that just worked. You can just pick it up. You knew what you were going to get, and that's exactly what I get with my 50mm planar. There may well be slightly better lenses out there, but I know that I can go out with that lens and I'll get the results that I want when it really, really matters. And I think that's one of the beauties of a great handling lens. Was frankly, it's the handling that makes that lens great for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's my go-to SLR lens as well. If I'm shooting SLR lenses on my Sony, I might put some really random stuff in my bag, but that one always finds a place in there because it's just, it's solid and everything. And honestly, on digital, you could really see the difference. On film, I don't know if I could tell the difference between, well, no, I'll be upfront. I can't really tell the difference between a lot of my SLR lenses, except for things like, point light source bokeh and stuff like that. But on digital, the CY lenses that I have, I think, smoke my other SLR lenses in terms of the pleasantness of their rendering. And it's not all about sharpness. Like the 85 1.4 planar is nowhere near as sharp, at least wide open or at equivalent like wide apertures compared to the 100mm f2 planar. But I like the rendering of the 85 quite a bit more. It's got a kind of smoother, slightly more interesting overall look than the planar, which is just like sharp and not modern and clinical, but there's something about its rendering that makes me want to pick it up less than the 85, which is, it's a lens that has a bit of a cult following. But I think that cult following is completely deserved because it really has some magic to it.
Yeah, I was going to say when I picked this RTS 3 up with that 85 planar, it's one of those lenses you put to your eye and you look through and you think, oh wow, this is nice. It just makes you smile when you look through it.
It is a sheer quantity of glass at the front, right?
Yeah.
But there are a lot of hidden optical qualities of some of these lenses too. Like I think when I got this set of lenses, I spent some time trying to figure out why cinematographers like them so much. And one of the things that I discovered shooting some test videos on my A7R2, the 28 distagon has a very odd behavior where it's pretty resistant to flare. But if you stop it down to, I think, F4, it will flare in a really, really attractive way if the light source is kind of above and like off frame. And that was kind of a surprise to me because a lot of lenses I've tried, like they'll flare wide open and then you stop them down and the flare disappears, right? But here's a lens that doesn't really flare in a noticeable way wide open. Or if it does flare, it's like a kind of veiling that doesn't add anything much noticeable to the shot. But then once you stop it down a couple of stops, you're able to make it like create this specific kind of look, and cinematographers really, really like that. So my brother is really into cinematography and video, and he really likes using that lens because at different apertures, he can make it do different stuff in different lighting conditions. And I mean, I'm sure lots of lenses are capable of that, but these CY lenses for me are super cool because I've noticed that they behave quite differently under different lighting conditions. Like with window light, they're absolutely stunning and gorgeous and sharp and, you know, that kind of perfect kind of lighting. And then at night with artificial light, they have a very different look to them. And then in bright daylight, again, they render differently. And I don't know, maybe I'm BSing and on all lenses do that, but to me, the CY lenses there's something to discover when I play with them, and I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, you've mentioned the 28 Distagon 2.8, and that was something I was going to say something about that, and especially when I was talking earlier about the Yashica lenses, some of the ML lenses being the same. And you said something earlier that sort of stopped me in my tracks a little bit, because I was going to talk about the Yashica ML 28 2.8 because there's two versions, or at least two versions of that lens, and the later version is a different design. It is optically different and it's optically superior. And I've got one of those in front of me at the moment. And I'm looking at, and I've also got a 28 Distagon, an AE Distagon, so the older design, because I was initially going to say, well, I've just had a look at these two lenses next to each other, and it's quite clear that they are not the same lens, because some people suggest that they are. But now you've told me that this AE lens is not the same as the MM, so that's completely muddied the waters to me now. Because and when I say like they're not the same lens, I'm just looking at the front element design, and the Yashica has got quite a flat front element, whereas there's quite a fair bit of curve. Well, there's a lot of curvature on the 28. That's a point. Have you got your 28 in front of you at the moment? Yeah. So the front element, is it quite flat, or is it curved? Got a good curve in it.
It's definitely curved. It's extremely concave.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, I think we can put that rumor to bed, because the Yashica is definitely flat, and both of the Distagons have got a convex, isn't it?
Yeah, you're talking about
it's convex. Yeah, it's convex, but it's the Ultron that's concave, and most lenses are convex, and it's just not the same lens. I mean, there's also a big difference in weight as well, but that could be just down to the construction of the lenses. But yeah.
And I'll bet you the focus ring, the throw is there. I have no idea. I've never tried any of the Yashica ones for CY. But like, do you have a 28 Distagon in front of you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, an AE. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see what I mean about how the focus throw is very, very short from infinity to 1 meter, and then you get like loads of space afterwards.
It's it's a difficult one on that one, because they can be geared differently anyway. But yeah, it has. I see what you're saying, because this goes from 2 meters. Yeah, between 2 meters and infinity is, it's probably around about 8 millimeters of travel.
Yeah.
Where on the Yashica it's much more. Although it's still like the main focus throw adjustment is in the close up stuff. So it's still working in the same principle.
Okay. Yeah. Because it's not the other Zeiss CY lenses don't have the same spacing. So it's specific to this, or at least some of the wider angle lenses.
Well, I've got a 25 in front of me, which is an AE lens. It's one of mine as well. That one is. Because I've had a 28, but I kept the 25 simply because who wants 28 millimeter? So 20. I've got the 25, and actually that's a point. I need to do a little test with these two, because the rumor has it that the 25 is actually a 26 millimeter and the 28 is a 27 millimeter in true focal length. So that doesn't
make a difference.
That's all lenses.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just a nonsense where people like say, "Oh, I want the 25 or I want the 28," and if there's only a millimeter difference between the two of them, and it's generally viewed that the 28 is a better performing. Oh, by the way, welcome back, Johnny.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it's generally viewed that the 28 is a superior lens to the 25, but the 25 is the one that people want to go for because it's a 25. But if there's only 1 millimeter between the two of them, then it's a nonsense, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's true. I guess if it's a choice between the two lenses, but yeah. I also realized that I might be full of crap, because I just grabbed Actually, give me a second. I'm gonna grab another lens just to check something. Okay. So I might be full of crap because I'm realizing that this. Wow, I'm really dumb. I don't know anything about lenses, guys. Why did you put me on this podcast? So the wide-angle SLR lenses have this different focus throw because of the difference in depth of field, primarily, right?
Yeah.
So your depth of field, yeah, okay. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were just entertaining you, you know. It sounded good.
Okay.
So we'll move swiftly on now, shall we?
Yep. Moving swiftly on.
Yeah. I'm thinking have we done KARL Zeiss to death? Or should we actually put a test to Johnny to ask him? So tell us what we've been talking about for the last half an hour, because we're not entirely convinced you've been there.
Let's see. I went and finished the laundry, and I cleaned the toilet, and I checked on my latest batch of ginger beer. So yeah, you guys have been really nailing it out of the park today. Yeah, it's been great.
Okay, well, I think in that case, I think we should start winding the show down now. On that classic note there.
Wait, two things before that. Number one, I'm not full of crap.
Oh right, okay.
I've just grabbed my OM Zoico 28 3.5, and it's not like that at all. It still has a short throw from infinity to 1, but then it's still very short after that. Okay, cool. Secondly, Simon, you haven't told us which ones, apart from the 51.4, are your favorites.
Well, obviously.
Because obviously the TSR is not one of them, right?
Yeah. Well, although it's good on the AX, and that's actually what I plan to do. I'm going to be using that 45 TSR on an AX because I've actually gone and bought an AX. I can't afford to go out and buy an AX, but I bought one because I'm not sure if I've got buyer's remorse at the moment. It's coming tomorrow and it's in the post now. But it's beautiful. It's mint. It's still got the box. Sorry?
I can't believe you bought an autofocus camera.
Well, I haven't. I've bought a manual focus camera that has got an autofocus button. There's a couple of things there. I'd actually convinced myself that I don't really like 35mm film anymore. So I bought another camera. So that makes sense. But the other part is when I used to shoot Contax, I had my 159 with. Funnily enough, I'd use that with a motor wind as well. So it was quite a bulky camera back in the day, but I used to love the extra grip on it. But I would also be walking around with my original Yashica FX1000. I think that's what it was. FX3000. That's the FX3 1000, and one would have colour in it and one would have black and white in it. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I can do something similar with this if I do actually start shooting these again, because I've got a roll of Fuji 250D from the darkroom that Brian has given us, and anybody that turns up at the 6 times darkroom will get a free roll of Fuji 250D, which is cine film, and it's got remjet on it, and we're going to learn how to take the remjet off and stuff like that. But it's really got me excited. Go on, sorry.
Please teach me when you're done, because I've got a couple of rolls of Vision T cinefilm sitting in my fridge, and I don't know what to do with them.
Well, my understanding is that it needs to go into very hot water, around about 55 degrees, and with some sodium carbonate, not bicarb, but sodium carbonate, the stuff you put into caffeinol, and give it a good shaking. That's we haven't done it yet, and we're going to experiment with a roll first, just to make sure it's not destroying anything. But that's what we're led to believe is the way.
Please let me know.
Yeah, that's it. Well,
I've read how to do it, but I've never actually tried it because I'm scared.
Well, yeah, no, it's understandable. Well, and we'll process it with it's C41. I think is it ECN2? I think is the correct way of doing it. But we're going to do C41 after getting rid of the remjet. So
that'll cross process it.
Well, I don't know if it's technically cross processing, but I think there might be a bit of a color shift towards the blue, I believe. But other than that, it's. It seems to be the way that most people seem to do it anyway. Plus, we've got C41 chemicals and not ECN2, so that's what it's going to be. And the film was free, so
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah, but yeah, so having access to some weird and wonderful film, and potentially 2 cameras that I can shoot different types of film, and that ability to actually, if something is moving, especially if I'm going to be. I keep saying I don't shoot people, but at some point I might well shoot people, and the AX will be the obvious camera to use because I can get that. I have just the same problem with focusing on eyes as anybody, and that's why I'll probably take a few shots with the Sony just in case one of them's more in focus than another. But if I can literally just get it there, or I think it's there, I can press the button and know it's there. Then it's a nice thing to have in your back pocket. So. Not that you can fit a Contax AX, even with a pancake Tessar on it in your back pocket.
You can't even fit a Contax T2 into your pocket.
No. So I've got one on the way.
Johnny, you're there.
Yes.
So all of this has Simon. I'm convinced that this whole hoarding Contax thing this week is just your way of compensating for having
not shooting Tessars.
Street and with a Leica and what was the other one? Whatever.
But it's certainly the case. I've because I've got to shoot a Tessar, I need a Contax AX. That's pretty much what's happened. So thanks for that.
So this has driven you. This entire ordeal has driven you to purchasing an autofocus camera.
Yeah.
Which means, Johnny, can we talk about how much it sucks to focus on film SLRs? Because clearly, if it's driving Simon to buy an autofocus camera, we can all agree that rangefinders are better, right?
That's a point. There was a conversation that was going on, wasn't there? About how difficult it is to focus these things, and rangefinders being easier if your eyesight is starting to go south a bit.
Mm-hmm. Fact. So, okay. So,
it's all about facts today.
Yeah. So is that the discussion, or is there more or is that it? Is there more to it?
That's a pretty good summary, actually.
It's just better and easier. Well, I mean that's.
So the whole effect, right, of shooting on a film SLR where it looks like it's in focus, but it's not when you actually look at the film. That's annoying, right? And that's totally a thing, right? I'm not full of crap here, right? It's totally a thing.
No, I think it's I've been thinking about this a lot. I think it comes down to focusing screens because
I think so too.
Yeah, because I realize that as easy as split image focusing screens seem to be on SLRs, I think they're very misleading. After many years of thinking, well, I had that perfectly aligned on my split image focusing screen, and then it's not actually in. That to me is kind of the takeaway. And I think that screens, the matte screens, where I got to find the proper terminology for the type of screen this is, but it's basically a matte screen with the center dot. And until that center dot is perfectly in focus, everything looks really out of focus.
I hate those.
Yeah, but I you know what? I used to hate them too, but now I'm thinking those are actually the best ones because you can actually tell the critical focus and not the almost critical focus that's really not in focus, but on both sides, front and back of in focus, which is what I think Perry's talking about. You can just kind of... Yeah.
No, go on.
No, and to me, I'm starting to think because I noticed on the that SLR I've been shooting the spacing on the name now. Petri, thank you. The Petri SLR I've been using. It has that screen, and there's not as much wiggle back and forth. It's either kind of in focus or it's not. So and some of the old Pentaxes have that screen. I'm sure there are plenty of other cameras with that screen, but I'm starting to believe that's the way to go versus the split screen. The split micro prism stuff. Yeah.
I have 4 SLRs in front of me right now, and my OM1, which I'm holding right now, has a split prism down the middle.
Yeah,
it's not that easy to focus. Same thing with my Nikon FM2. I don't really trust the split prism here on this one I'm holding. Same with my Contax S2. The one in front of me that I think is the most accurate across the frame is my Spotmatic, which is annoying because I don't like this camera at all.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like the bits that are out of focus, much like a rangefinder, when they're in focus, they pop. Whereas on all the other focusing screens of these cameras in front of me, when it's in focus versus slightly out of focus, it looks the same.
Right. Exactly.
And I mean, that makes a huge difference. I don't want to use this Spotmatic.
I don't blame you. I'm like just reaching for cameras off the shelf to see if I can find one that's.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. This Spotmatic is by far the most accurate of all of them.
Yeah, with the old, and that's the old style screen.
Yeah, exactly. It's that old screen where there's no prism. The middle is just a dot.
Right.
And then there's like a very faint circle around the dot. So
and it's almost like a 3D effect, right? Like it actually looks closer it's really out of focus until it's in focus.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what I meant by when it's in focus, the whole scene pops.
Right.
Similar to like really good rangefinder patches where when your double image is aligned, like the contrast pops out of the viewfinder. Versus when it's slightly misaligned, you can tell that you're even slightly off. So Simon, maybe that's why you don't like 35mm film, because your SLRs don't focus properly and you had to buy an autofocus one.
No. The contact screens are great, as far as I'm concerned, at least anyway. And as I was saying earlier, if you're using a fast lens and it's got a decent amount of contrast, then it's not difficult to focus. But I think one of the things though, that if you're an SLR shooter, then you get a little bit obsessed by focus, whereas as a rangefinder shooter, it's less important because you're generally shooting stop down anyway. So if those windows align, then you've got focus. That's it, because you're also almost certainly using more depth of field as well.
But I'm quite confident in my focusing ability with, like, super fast lenses wide open on my Leica. Like I've nailed street shots with my friend's Noctilux, and I miss some as well. But it's confidence inducing. Whereas with these SLRs, what I find is when I get to the point where I think I'm in focus, I try to check it by like adjusting it a little bit.
Dude,
and then it looks like a little bit more in focus, and I'm like, oh fuck, oh sorry.
Exactly. That's exactly right. They're instead of confidence inducing, they're doubt inducing.
Oh, exactly.
Wait, is that really in focus?
Yeah, and then you're just sitting there like wiggling the focusing ring back and forth and not actually taking any pictures.
That's me. Yep.
There we go. Well, shall we? Actually, I completely avoided the question when you asked me about what my favourite lenses were, and I've already said the 51.4, and the other one is the 85 2.8 sonar.
I want that one.
Yeah, I think it's a stunning lens. I've no idea how it compares to the 1.4 planar, and I haven't actually got the two lenses together to check them, because it's just gone in for a little bit of work on the focus ring to make it. It's just a little bit on the stiff side, so I'm having that adjusted. But from what I've seen of this 85 1.4, I'd like one. there's no two ways about it. Even though I've had a go at the fact that nobody ever. Well, it's not always a good idea to shoot at a 1.4, but it's going to be that much easier if you are shooting at 2.8 just to nail that focus. But the 85 2.8 is a really easy lens to nail the focus. It's also a lot lighter, and it's at 2.8. It's the best 85 lens that I've used. This 85 1.4 might be as good. I don't know, but it's just wonderful shooting it wide open at 2.8 on that particular lens. So two special lenses there. Yeah,
dude. If you hadn't bought the AX, you could pretty much have almost picked up a 1.4.
No. I could buy two AXs, if not more, for the price of what I paid, at least, for a good 85 1.4, especially an MM, because I'd want an MM. So
wait, how much do they go for in your neck of the woods?
I've not looked for a while. I'm guessing around about 400 plus pounds.
Okay,
that is.
yeah, around 400 pounds sounds about right.
Yeah. So that's.
Well, how cheap did you get your AX for?
Well, I don't think I got it that cheap, but it's cost me £200, but it's unused, so I think it's about as good as it's going to get. Whether it still works with it not being used for the last 20 years is another matter. But I'll give it a go and check it over. But it's as good an AX as potentially I could possibly get. So you can pick them up for less than that. Although some are going for more than that as well.
Yeah,
so.
Here they're like the same price as an 85 1.4. That's why.
Right. So how much is an 85 1.4 where you are?
Yeah, around you can find them for just under £400, maybe like.
Oh, okay. So the AXs so it's the AXs are expensive over there, relatively speaking, to what they are over here. I get it.
They're quite scarce.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. So I know where to sell my AX if I decided I don't want to keep it anymore. That's good news. But if you'd said like it was I could get an 85 1.4 for £200, then that might be a different story. But no, alas, no. Okay. Shall we start to bring the show to, because it's a bit of a marathon now. I think we were well over 2 hours, so I think these poor people have got work and jobs to do and things like that. So should we start winding down?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll quickly do coffee news. We've been supported by a few people this week, so thank you very much. And in particular, Nigel Cliff has left a comment saying, can't think of anything deep and meaningful or sarcastic to say. So thanks for another cracking show. Well, thank you, Nigel. Brian Walworth has supported us again. That's a recurring donation there. So thank you, Brian. And just in today, while we've actually been online, Christoph Siegelin says a big thank you for the most entertaining Chicago weather forecast out there. Johnny, what's the weather like in Chicago?
Oh God, I thought I got away with it this time. It's horrible. I hate this weather so much. I can't stand it. It's like, let me just pull up the weather, what it says it's going to do this week. It's going to be like 90 degrees and humid all week long, which is the absolute worst weather for me. I can't stand it.
What is that in North America?
Hold on a second. I'll switch it to Celsius. Wait, I know how to do this. Wait a second. Let's see. Somewhere in here is the thing that
32.
says 32. Okay. Yeah, there you go. It is, it's 83 and humid right now. And it's upper 80s and lower 90s, or to upper 90s all week long. So, no air conditioning at Central Camera. So please be nice to me this week, or I'm going to get surly on you. And so what happens is there's a hurricane down in the Gulf. So, New Orleans, I guess, barely escaped a really potentially bad event down there. So what happens is that hurricanes in the Gulf, they hit the southern Gulf, and then they sort of like push their way up through the south to up towards Chicago, up the Mississippi River. And so all that heat and humidity coming from the Gulf of Mexico ends up, right over Chicago a couple of days later. So we'll have that effect for the next week or so here, and I'm just not going to be happy.
Well,
yeah.
Well, thanks for the forecast there and keeping Christoph happy. Have you got any shout-outs this week, Johnny?
I do. This is usually where I space out about shout-outs, but as I told Sam from Michigan, please write down Sam from Michigan on a business card, and I'll put it in my pocket, and I'll mention on the podcast that I met Sam from Michigan this week at Central Camera Company. And thank you for listening to the podcast, and thank you for stopping in to say hello.
Excellent. And how about you, Perry?
I do not have any shout-outs this week.
Okay. Well, we did have a couple of emails, which we're going to have to park those for another week. Including one that I didn't do last week either. So that one will. There's one about adapters, which we'll talk about that in the future show. So that's it then. So Perry, how can people keep up with what you're doing?
At perryge.com or perryge on Instagram and Flickr.
Okay, and Johnny?
I am System Photography on Instagram, and you can also catch up with me at Central Camera Company in Chicago every day of the week except for Sunday and Monday, and I would be happy to speak with you there.
Okay, and what if people want to do anything on Instagram in classic lens related? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, they should go to Best Vintage Lens on Instagram. They are our Instagram partner. So go to Best Vintage Lens on Instagram. And you can also send us an email at classiclensespodcast@gmail.com. And of course, classiclensespodcast.com is where you will find this podcast.
It is. And the show notes are there as well.
Absolutely.
And we've got our Facebook group as well, the Classic Lenses Podcast Facebook group, which is almost the same but different from the Photography with Classic Lenses group. And just to clarify what the difference is, because there is a little bit of understandable confusion. The podcast, the Facebook group for the podcast is just about things that are related to the podcast, and that's where we put things which are specifically podcast related. So it's just this feeling that we were wagging it was like the dog wagging the tail of Photography with Classic Lenses, where we'd want to put some information out about the podcast which is going to be of limited interest, should we say, to the group as a whole, and ultimately we have a louder voice than most users in there, so it just felt a little bit disproportionate, so a little bit self-indulgent, whereas doing it in our own group, it's a case of, well, people know why we're doing it, and they choose to go there because they want to know things about the podcast, or they want to interact with us, because that's a great way to actually have a conversation with us, and we're more comfortable to have it there than take up space and keep on appearing at the top of Photography with Classic Lenses. So that's what that's all about. Any more? I can say something about next week, because we have a guest next week. We have Isabel Cordes, and I just realised I've not quite said her name right, and I've been practicing it, so I'm sorry, Isabel, who's probably going to listen to this podcast. I'll try and do it better next week. But Isabel is an artist, and interestingly, she's been over the years she's been exploring different forms of photography, largely in film, but with digital as well. And she's very recently announced that she's pretty much sold all her film related gear, but she's still using old lenses. So we're going to have a chat to Isabel next week about that artistic decision. Why do that? Why not just keep some things and just, it's always like baby with the bathwater kind of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how a recognised artist would make such a pretty drastic decision. but ultimately did the right thing and is going to continue to use old lenses. So looking forward to that chat. So that's it. Thank you to Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com for our theme music at Octave Blues. I've just realised I've not said anything about where you can listen to me or catch up with me, which is on Instagram as Simon Forster Photographic, on Twitter as Simon4. I also do a fortnightly podcast with Andrew Bartram called the Large Format Photography Podcast. If that's something that might float your boat, have a listen to that. And that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's show, and if you can, be like KARL.